Welcome to the Tech Humanist Show, a multimedia format program exploring how data and technology shape the human experience. I'm your host, Kate O'Neill.
One of the things that I write about in More Than a Glitch, in the opening chapter, is this idea that machines, computers, are really good at mathematical decisions, and they're really bad at social decisions.
Our guest today is Meredith Broussard. Meredith is an associate professor at NYU and a leading voice on algorithmic accountability. Meredith's work has helped many people see that data and AI systems are not neutral, and that what looks like a technical decision is often a human decision about power, priorities, and who gets protected. Well, Meredith, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here today.
Oh my gosh, so it's so exciting because I know you've been doing this work around algorithmic accountability for a long, long time. And I wonder, when you look at the last 2 or 3 years and everything that's changed, what is it that you feel like has changed the most? Is it the technology? Is it the stakes? Is it, something more like the stories we tell ourselves? What do you feel like is changing?
Oh, it's very much about the stories that we tell ourselves, because we are at a particular point in the AI hype cycle where everybody wants to be on board with AI. Everybody wants to show that they're using AI in business, but nobody really knows what that means or what it would look like. And so obviously we've had chatbot technology for many years now. It really hit the mainstream starting around 2020, and then 2022 was really the tipping point where people were like, "Oh, ChatGPT, what's this thing?" But really, we've all been using AI for many years without realizing it. It just wasn't labeled as AI. So every time you do a Google search, for example, you're activating something like 250 different machine learning models, right? So it's so interesting to me what feels like using AI versus what feels like using technology, right? And AI is somehow expected to be exciting and technology is somehow mundane, right? But things very quickly switch from being AI to being mundane.
Yeah. 250 different technologies is a pretty interesting, or different models is a pretty interesting stat. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, Google search is incredibly complicated and it's been with us for 30 years now?
So long. Yeah.
So if you think about the fact that Google is rolling out different iterations of search technology several times a day, every day, that is a large and complicated code base. So it's not really surprising that there's hundreds and hundreds of things going on behind the scenes. Also you can think about a chip and think about how many billions of transistors are on just one silicon chip. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, it is. I actually started my tech writing career in Silicon Valley in '96, documenting chips, and never went back because software is so much more accessible to me. But yes, it is so complicated. I'm wondering too, what is something that you were saying years ago that you feel like is finally landing more broadly now, and what still isn't landing?
So one of the big messages of artificial unintelligence, which came out in 2018, was the idea that we embed our own biases in the technologies we create. So I've been arguing for a long time that we should look at what these technologies are actually doing instead of using magical thinking around them. There's one idea I talk a lot about called techno-chauvinism. This is the idea that technological solutions are superior to others. And instead, I argue that we should be thinking about using the right tool for the task, because sometimes the right tool for the task is absolutely a computer. And sometimes the right tool for the task is something simple like a book in the hands of a child on a parent's lap. One is not inherently better than the other. So there is an urge to use AI right now because, as I said, we're in the middle of a hype cycle, but it doesn't really always make sense to use AI. It's not really always the best tool for the task.
I know. I figured techno-chauvinism might come up. I'm glad you brought it up. I wonder too, with that specifically, did you feel like there was something when you first started talking about this idea that people were missing that you either still see being missed now, or you feel like, oh, people are actually starting to get this? Like, does it intersect with the idea of, digital detoxes, for example, or, the idea that people are sort of trying to think about how to differentiate their behaved lives in different
Mm-hmm.
ways around technology?
Mm-hmm. Well, so something that has really radically changed, especially since the pandemic, is there used to be a parallel track. So you used to be able to do things without using technology, right? There
Hmm.
used to be paper tax forms at the post office that you could go and pick up and you could still do
Yeah.
your taxes on paper. Now, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a functioning post office in your community, that post office probably does not have printed tax forms featured as prominently. Uh, and so whereas in the past it was possible to do things without technology, now it is not really possible to do things without technology.
Yeah.
And so now we're seeing a backlash to that. We're seeing parents opting their kids out of using Chromebooks in the classroom. We're seeing people understand the value of doing a digital detox. We're seeing young people understand addiction to their phones, addiction to their devices. And they're saying, okay, we don't want to live like this. And so it's kind of the triumph of the vision of technology that people had in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
This idea that technology would be everywhere, that everybody would be relying on devices for everything. And we kind of got that world and we realized that, oh, it's pretty crappy. Like we need a better balance.
You just gave me like a Portlandia theme song earworm, like the dream of the 90s is alive in
And
2026 or
yep,
something.
exactly. Exactly. I mean, one of the things that I do in my work is I go through historical documents about what we imagined was going to be the future of technology, right?
Hmm.
Because the futurists have been talking about this stuff for a long time, and a lot of them are wrong. And the thing about
Hmm.
being a futurist is you don't generally go around saying, "Oh yeah, sorry, I was wrong about this thing." So like when somebody says, "Oh, we're definitely going to have self-driving cars everywhere by 2024," and then that doesn't happen, uh, they don't make a big thing about it.
Right.
Oh yeah, I was wrong about this thing. Like they just kind of quietly slink off, or they start making really loud proclamations about something else,
The
so
next
that
thing.
people will forget that they
Yeah.
were wrong. I mean, it's a strategy.
It is a strategy. They say hope is not a strategy, but maybe denial is a strategy. I'm wondering about when you talk about the different ways that people respond to techno-chauvinism and how people are mediating around it. How do you think about things like social media ban in Australia, or for young people, or any kind of those types of approaches where it's about bans and restrictions as opposed to kind of cultivating an awareness of creating a distance between you and your technology, or are they related to one another?
So what I would say is we just need a lot more nuance. We need to back off from the idea that social platforms are all good or all bad.
Hmm.
And we need to back off from thinking, okay, we can write one machine centered rule for all people everywhere throughout time, right? Because this idea of write once, run anywhere is really deeply embedded in software. And you can do write once, run anywhere for something like word processing, but you
Hmm.
can't do it for social spaces, right? So one of the things that I write about in More Than a Glitch, in the opening chapter, is this idea that machines, computers, are really good at mathematical decisions and they're really bad at social decisions.
Hmm.
So the question of what should kids see and when, at what age, is a social decision. And the people who are making the social platforms the social media platforms, are oriented toward engagement. They're oriented toward making the greatest amount of money. So, a ban is still this one-shot thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, we need the software technology to work differently,
Mm-hmm.
and we need, in the real world, a combination of regulation and education.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Thinking about mismatches, I guess that's kind of what you're describing there. Where do you see the biggest mismatch between how people imagine that AI works and how it actually behaves in practice?
So something that I think kind of does a disservice to our imagination about AI is our fixation on Hollywood, right? So Hollywood movies about AI, about science fiction futures are fantastic. Like they are so fun. And like, if I'm being honest, I think about the Terminator like way more than, anything else really. But those are imaginary. But
Hmm.
something really interesting happens in our brains, okay? Because our brains are better at remembering and recalling stories than they are at recalling facts and statistics. So Hollywood has told these amazing stories about monsters, about dystopia, about these kind of wild precognitive futures. And those are the stories that stick in people's brains. And we are definitely running into a bunch of problems because technologists are using things like Minority Report as prescriptions, not as cautionary tales, right? So we really need to think about reality when we think about AI, as opposed to thinking about Hollywood type imaginaries. So, for example, when you are thinking about, should I use a chatbot to replace my existing customer service operation? Well, you're imagining that the chatbot is going to work really well and is going to, be like Rosie in the Jetsons, or is going to function as well as your favorite Hollywood AI. And in reality, the chatbot is going to hallucinate a lot. It's going to give people the wrong information a lot. It is going to have all of these dysfunctions that you can't see because you can't read the code, you can't figure out where stuff is going wrong, and you're not really monitoring it effectively, right?
Yeah.
So there's a reason that 95% of AI, of generative AI experiments have failed inside corporations because the chatbot technology is just not that robust. But what people are finding success with is kind of older forms of AI. So you can couple, say, machine learning with code generation, and that is a successful combo. As long as you don't expect the computer to replace a human being effectively.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so important, I think, to be able to unpack the taxonomy, the ontology of what you're describing, but I don't think we have a lot of discourse that's doing that really well for us. And I think people are returning to, as you say, the sort of science fiction, the Hollywood science fiction stories, because they're easy. So I wonder if you have an example that you return to often when you talk with people about this, because it maybe makes hidden assumptions visible, even if people don't think of themselves as technical. Is there something that's graspable for people that helps them understand some of these nuances?
Well, I do a lot of talks and I do a lot of communicating complex technical ideas in plain language for
Hmm.
audiences. And I often start with a definition of what generative AI is.
Hmm.
And so the way that we make a generative AI system is the same way that we make a machine learning system. And what we do is we take a whole bunch of data, say like all the data that can be scraped from the internet. We take all this data, we plunk it into the computer, we say, computer, make a model. This model shows the mathematical patterns in the data. And then we can do all kinds of cool things with this model. we can use it to make decisions or predictions, or we can generate new text or audio or images or video based on the training data. Okay. And we can look at what is in the training data to make some predictions about what the outputs are going to be of the system. So it's really hard to think about all of the text on the internet throughout time. Okay. It's just an unfathomable amount of material. So it's easier to think about, okay, what are some of the data sets in the training data? Well, we know that there are pirated books in there. So there's a big lawsuit that Anthropic settled because they used two specific databases called Books 2 and Books 3 that had been pirated. And those were unauthorized copies of copyrighted books. Okay. And that seems pretty benign. On the other hand, what is in the training data is also the entire corpus of Reddit. Okay. And most people are familiar with how Reddit is really delightful in some ways and absolutely has some of the worst of humanity
Right.
in other ways. Right. And so this is the training data for these chatbots. And so they are inevitably going to come out with some antisocial speech, antisocial images, and we see this, right? Like the famous case when Google was criticized for Gemini making making images of people with light skin as a default, and Google said, "Oops, our mistake," and they put in some code that required a range of skin tones in images that were put out by Gemini. And then people immediately use that to make images of Black Nazis. Right? So these are machines. They're not people. And the idea that you're going to be able to govern these ungovernable machines with human rules is just not reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a great way to bring it down to an accessible level for folks to grasp. I'm wondering, in this generative AI era, or now the almost post-generative AI era, I suppose, what do you think has become more urgent that you didn't think was as acute 5 years ago?
So I am really concerned with the way that people are turning decision making over to AI systems because the AI systems have gotten much more fragile. Cory Doctorow has written about Unshedification, the idea that, oh yeah, it's a great book. And it's the idea that all of our technological systems are kind of shitty nowadays, and they're getting a little bit worse all the time. So technology used to work, right? And things in the world used to work, and now they don't. And they're broken in a million different ways, and nobody feels like fixing them. In part because it's so complicated. Social media platforms, for example, are so complicated that the engineers who make them cannot describe actually what is happening in them or how they work, right? So, I mean, that's another reason they're really resisting, putting in, say, things like more protection against generating child sexual abuse material, is because, on the one hand, they don't want to because they would have less engagement and they would make less money. And on the other hand, like, a lot of them are not really sure how to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, even short of those maligned sorts of topics, that when you talk about, things just not working, the unshedification of platforms, it also reminds me of, back in the 90s and before, when we would work in technology, there was this concept of yak shaving, right? Like, if you decided you want to create a process around something, you would often spend more time building the process than you would have just doing the thing. And that was understandable if you were building a process that was going to be a recurring routine or a subroutine. But now it seems like if you're using generative AI or tools like ChatGPT to do something, you're getting bad output, and you're just accepting that you're getting bad output. It doesn't even seem like there's. I think we need a new term. Maybe Unshedification is kind of getting us there for this process of trying to do something, getting bad results, and just kind of being like, all right, well that's just the best it can do right now, or something. I'll just go ahead and post it to LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, that is incredibly depressing, what you just said. And one of the interesting things to me is keeping up with the business press on how
Mm.
effective has AI actually been. And what people have realized now, these many years into the generative AI revolution, is that actually using generative AI means more work, not less.
Yeah. So it is yak shaving, but ChatGPT yak shaving or something.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's
don't
just,
know.
there aren't that many useful like kind of enterprise-wide useful applications of generative AI.
Yeah.
It is really helpful for coding. So something that has happened is that Stack Overflow, the site where people would ask and answer questions about coding.
Hmm.
So traffic on Stack Overflow has gone to almost zero, right? Because people are checking their code with ChatGPT, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yes, we have even more code being produced. Is that good code? No,
Right.
because like what happens with something like Claude Code is, yeah, if you're a mediocre coder, then it will help you be a less mediocre coder, right? And it allows you to do things like spin up websites with a certain aesthetic really quickly,
Hmm.
because like spinning up a website with definite aesthetic is a thing that people have done many, many times. And so it can easily be emulated, it can easily be automated. But for like coding a new app, yeah, you can get the look and feel, but like there are going to be so many security holes. And if you launch that for your business, then it's going to have all the security holes, and then your customers are going to suffer as a result, and your corporate reputation is going to suffer as a result. And now there's a whole industry of people who specialize in cleaning up vibe code, right? So you've got a kind of amateur developer who's like, oh yeah, I'm going to use Claude Code or whatever to like make this code, and I'm going to generate it real fast, and here's my prototype. And then you have to hire a real professional to clean it up because it has so many problems. And so arguably you should have just hired the professional coder in the first place.
Right. You're just pushing the labor farther down the pipe.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And it ends
interesting.
up being more expensive that way.
Yeah, more expensive, and you're probably not getting, quality considerations built in from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm hearing is you're talking about this, and it's. I know that in the past you've emphasized that these are governance and power questions as much as they are technical ones. And so
Mm-hmm.
who should be getting to say, or who gets to say yes or no to deploying AI in most organizations, and who should?
Well, I think that the thing that people should focus on is if you're going to deploy AI, you need to have a test period, and you need to have really clear benchmarks that say, all right, this AI is effective at this thing or not effective at this thing. So, in the same way that we have performance reviews for employees, you need performance reviews for your technology, right? We tend to think about technology adoption as being like a thing that we buy and then we use it for the rest of our lives. But that's not true. We replace, they want you to replace your phone every year, for one thing. Our laptops and our desktop computers are on, multi-year replacement
Right.
cycle. Nobody's using the same enterprise technology that they were 10 years ago, because software is it's not quite disposable, but it's a time limited thing.
Hmm.
And by saying, oh, it lives in the cloud and you can run it anywhere and it's so flexible, like that is a marketing pitch,
Hmm.
right? The cloud is just somebody else's computer,
Right.
right? The cloud is some anonymous data center in Northern Virginia. Like
Right.
it's not an intangible, it is a tangible thing. It is code running on a computer somewhere. Something that's interesting is in San Francisco, when the power grid goes down or when neighborhoods lose power, there are all of these essential parts of the internet that disappear and people freak out. So, for example, there have been at least two really notable power outages in San Francisco, and the Internet Archive has gone down. Right? People think about the Internet Archive, they think about the Wayback Machine as being
Yeah.
like the repositories for internet history. And yeah, they preserve a lot of really important internet history, but the servers are based in a converted church in San Francisco. And
On
so
a
when the
fault
power goes
line.
out on a fault
Yeah.
line,
Yeah.
so when the power goes out to that street, guess what? The Internet Archive goes down and there's no more history, right? So these technologies are really fragile and they are time limited.
Yeah, it's an incredible reminder. And thinking about this, the concept of responsible AI that some organizations say they're doing, what do you listen for as the most important sort of tell for whether that's real or performative from organizations?
So responsible AI needs to be folded in with data governance, with kind of good corporate governance. We need to be making sure that AI systems are following the laws of the land in every different land, which is absolutely not the case. We need to make sure that systems function as expected, which they do not. Some estimates show that generative AI systems like chatbots, hallucinate about 50% of the time. Okay. And we need performance reviews for AI. So you can't just adopt an AI system and say, oh, we have a responsible AI officer, therefore, we're going to be able to fire all the people who do the job that we think we want the AI to do. You don't fire those people because your AI is probably not going to function the way that you think it is. And like, you're going to need those people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been so distressing over the last couple of years, right? To see so many of these hyperscaler organizations letting go of their ethics and responsibility teams
Mm-hmm.
right at the
Mm-hmm.
moment we see the incredible ramp up of AI
Right.
capabilities and investments.
Yeah, very much so.
Doesn't that seem like a parallel decision to me?
I mean, is it a responsible decision? Like, arguably, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
another thing that companies need to think about is the pipeline, right? So it's a very tough time right now for getting an entry level position. A
Mm.
lot of my college students are struggling to find entry level jobs. And a
Hmm.
lot of this is because there's this perception at companies that, oh, we'll just use an AI to do the work that, say, a first or second year legal associate would do. Well, the problem is that when you have no entry level people, you have no pipeline. You
Hmm.
don't then develop people who have mastery in this particular area because succeeding in business is not just about, uh, kind of making the widgets. It's about expertise. It's about creativity. It's about being nimble at problem solving. And a generative AI has none of those things.
Yeah. It also doesn't have, I mean, maybe it has longevity, but it doesn't have longevity in the way that the transfer of sort of human knowledge and culture and morale and, kind of community and that sort of thing within a company would have. So
Absolutely.
it's a loss
But,
for sure.
and you know what? I mean, let's think about this longevity issue for a
Hmm.
minute, because there was a famous case where people were developing relationships with some iteration of some generative AI model. I think it was a Claude model, X point, whatever. And then that model got retired, and
Hmm.
people threw funerals for this model, right? So each model just works differently than the previous model. And so if you are building a business process around this particular generative AI model and you think it works one way, well, guess what? The next iteration is going to work a little differently.
Yeah.
And like the next model is coming out really quickly. I mean, think about how often you see these announcements about, oh, so and so AI company has a new model. Like it happens pretty frequently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It happens like every day, it feels like. We were
Hmm.
just having this conversation with another guest the other day where we were saying that she knows people who are doing 2 hours in the morning of just reviewing the AI news and still feeling like they're falling behind. And I was like, heck, it's very relatable. There's an awful lot of things that happen every single day if you're paying
Hmm.
attention to AI news around the world. And
Right.
it's constant. So
Well, and
yeah,
also people are using generative AI to generate what they call AI news,
yeah.
right? But which is actually slop. And,
True.
you know,
True, but
yeah,
even just keeping up with like this model got updated or, this new thing happened between this agentic AI and this agentic AI on this AI social network,
yeah.
it's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, I mean, arguably that's not news, right?
Mhm.
So as a journalist, like I have long noticed that there's a difference between what journalists consider news in technology and what technologists think is news, right? So technologists think, oh, every time that something new is published, like it should be news. And like, yes, it is something that happened, but is it newsworthy? Like to the in the sense that it rises to the level of being of public interest, of general interest? Like, no.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And good distinction. What do you see happening with safeguards that are falling behind adoption? What do you see about that worries you most as you look around internationally and across communities, across states, and the different types of safeguards that are being developed, deployed, or rolled back on? How do you look at that, and what's on your mind the most about that?
So I am, I alternate between being more worried right now and being just as worried as I've always been,
Mm.
right? Which is like pretty concerned. And I've been pretty concerned. I've been at like a high level of concern for a very long time now. So I think that we need to start with making sure that technological systems obey existing laws. And we need to make sure that our existing laws are are suited to you know suited to inclusion, right? So we need our lawmakers to be people of good moral character, and we need our laws to be consistent with democracy and morality.
Hmm. Yeah. What? Yeah, man. There's so much that's going on that feels like it's out of step with what you're saying too. And it comes back to, it feels like we were talking just a moment ago about the data centers and the sort of distributed someone else's computer cloud setup. I'm wondering, what do you think accountability looks like when harm is distributed and responsibility is diffused across vendors, models, data,
Yeah.
and
Well,
decision
Kate,
makers?
can I pause us for a second and can I just take a quick break? I have to get a
Of
drink
course,
and
of
then
course, of
we can come
course.
back to this question. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right. I paused it, so just unpaused it. I'm so glad I remembered to
Terrific.
unpause it.
Yeah,
'Cause my producer would have been very upset with me.
exactly.
Do you want me to restate the question?
Yes, please. And here,
Yeah.
let me hide myself again. Hang on.
Oh, yeah, I know it bothers me whenever I have it visible. I'm like
Yeah,
performing for my own image. Like, oh,
right.
hi. Well, I was asking, you talked a moment ago about data centers in the reference to thinking about the cloud being someone else's computer. And it reminds me about, I think the data centers seem like they're a part of this diffusion of responsibility. And I'm wondering what you think accountability can look like in a world where the harm is so distributed and responsibility is so diffused across vendors and across models and data and decision makers.
Well, I think we need to kind of think holistically about our technological systems, how they are made, who makes them, and what is the impact of these systems. Okay, so for example, a generative AI chatbot uh, is running on a computer, is running in the cloud, right? Well, that means a physical computer somewhere at a data center. And well, we know that data centers are having tremendous environmental impact. We know that communities are being harmed by data centers being present. And we can also think about, okay, what is actually happening there? Because you've probably heard data centers require a lot of water. You know, maybe you've seen some kind of statistic like, oh, every time you do a ChatGPT query, it's like pouring out a bottle of water on the ground. But most people are confused by that. I mean, what does that actually mean? Okay, well, here's what's actually happening. If you think about what happens when you use your laptop on your lap for a while, like there is something physical that happens. Your laptop gets really warm and you have to do something different to cool it down, right? So the computers that power generative AI are so much more powerful than your laptop. Like, you know, hyperscale more powerful than your laptop. And these AI computers that are used to train models and to respond to queries, for example, get really, really hot. And in fact, they get so hot that you can't use regular air conditioning to cool them down. You have to use water. So what happens is you have like a rack of servers, and then there'll be a hose kind of snaking around the back of these servers, and you run cool water through that hose, and that takes away some of the heat from these computers, right? So it's a water cooling system, which makes a lot of sense because, you run some water next to something and it cools it down, it takes away the heat. Okay. And yes, you can recirculate that water, absolutely, but you can only recirculate it, say, 3 or 4 times before it gets hot and it gets full of gunk from the hose. So then you have to discharge that water into the local sewer system or the local, water treat. You have to send it to the local water treatment plant. And so then you think about the thousands and thousands of computers in a given data center. You think about the proliferation of data centers, and you think about how hot those, those data centers are getting. You think about the huge amount of water that they take, right? And so this is why we find that data centers are doing things like depleting local aquifers, and people who live near the data centers are being affected because the water pressure in their houses will just disappear. And we can also look at the history of something like fracking to understand what is the impact on a community of extractive companies using up all of the water in the local aquifer. Like, it's not good.
Not good. And so thank you for that. It was a wonderful explanation, I think, for folks who aren't making that connection with why are we talking about water when we talk about generative AI use. I love the vivid example of the laptop on your lap. I think we can all probably relate to that. But thinking about moving it toward our last kind of question here, and you've been so generous with your time. I want to make sure we respect it. As we think about the future and as we think about what we can hope for and what we can do better, what does better look like in the real world? Maybe not just in policy language, but what do we need to do? What's the work we need to do well over the next few years in order to have better, and what would better look like for us?
So I think better has to do with balance. Better means not making unsubstantiated claims about what AI can do. Balance means understanding that not everything needs to be all technological all the time, right? It means confronting techno-chauvinism, and it means kind of adding more nuance to all of our discussions. So it's not about is AI good or is AI bad? It's about what kind of AI are we talking about, for what, in what context, and who made it, right? So if you want to use AI for, say, protein folding and integrated into the new drug discovery process. Like, fantastic. Like, we've seen lots of advances in that realm. However, getting new drugs to market takes about 10 years, right? So you're not getting instant gratification in the way that most people imagine that AI is going to be able to perform, right? So we just need more nuance. We need to be more realistic about what machines can and can't do. And we need to think about these processes, these technological processes, from the point at which minerals are extracted from the ground to make computers, to the point where computing happens at data centers that need cool air and water, like, to the point of, okay, well, if kids are going to use this in school, well, there are certain technologies that have been shown to be addictive. Should we really be doing that to children in school? And most of the time, the answer to should we be doing that to children is no.
Right. Yes. Good reminder. So more nuance, less techno-chauvinism, and more systems thinking and overall ecosystem thinking. That sounds like a pretty good recipe. Thank you so much. Meredith Broussard, thank you for being with us, and thank you for everything that you're doing in your work. Where can people find more about your work?
So my website is meredithbroussard.com, and my books, More Than a Glitch and Artificial Unintelligence, How Computers Misunderstand the World, are both available everywhere books are sold.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Meredith.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Tech Humanist Show. This episode was produced and edited by Thrive Loud Productions, with research by Ashley Robinson and Aaron Daughtry of Interrobang. You can find more information about the show's guests and links to their projects at thetechhumanist.com, where you can also find more episodes, or you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks to all of our guests for lending their voices to help make the future a brighter place. I'm Kate O'Neill. You've been listening to The Tech Humanist Show from KO Insights.